So hi everyone, I'm Becky Halbe. I'm an Extension Master Gardener, and Puwen and Jane and I have been doing these talks for 5 or 6 years. Normally we would be seeing you around a table with a pretty tablecloth and some flowers, and we would have some edible plants for you to try, and we would have some dishes, and Jane always made these beautiful brochures that had a lot of information, beautiful pictures and recipes. So we're going to try to bring that experience to you as best we can over Zoom. We are, of course, in the pandemic, the COVID-19, and we all are learning new skills and still wanting to educate. That is a primary mission of Extension Master Gardeners. So here's a word from our sponsors, the Virginia Cooperative Extension Service. Here in Virginia, we have 2 land-grant colleges, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University, that help make these programs and the Extension Master Gardener program possible. A little bit more about Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia and the whole Extension Master Gardener program. It has been in effect here in Virginia since 1985, promoting public education and environmentally sound gardening practices. Our help desk is still open 9 to noon, Monday through Friday. It's email only, and there's the email address right here for you. The plant clinics are closed during the pandemic. We are, of course, doing classes like this and free classes. And our demonstration gardens are open. Just please maintain at least 6-foot distance between people you don't live with and have a mask handy. The website for MGNV is here, and the website for Virginia Extension Service is also listed there. All right, so we are going to try to cover quite a bit today. We are not going to cover mushrooms. None of us are experienced enough in mushrooms to feel safe to share that information. Mushrooms are wonderful organisms. There's nothing bad. I'm not trying to say anything bad about mushrooms. It's just that if you don't know exactly what you're picking, they can kill you. And I mean kill you quickly. I have a friend I was just dog walking with the other day, and she used to live in France, and there was somebody outside a village that was selling little baskets full of mushrooms that they had just grown. And she was so looking forward to eating these mushrooms. And her husband said, I want to take these to the mycologist that I know before we cook these. My friend, she was going to eat them for dinner that night. She was all ramped up to eat these mushrooms. But her husband said, no, let me take them to the mycologist. And this is a bit of a sad story. While they were in line waiting to talk, because there were several people in line to talk to this person, there was a woman who was crying. And she was crying because one of her family members had eaten a mushroom possibly sold by the same person and had died. And when the mycologist looked at my friend's mushrooms, good mushroom, this one will kill you. Good mushroom, this one will kill you. So mixed in with the good mushrooms were deadly ones. And that's why, please, if you don't know exactly what you are looking at and looking for, don't mess with mushrooms. So we are not going to talk about animals. We're not going to talk about how to get rid of the deer that might be eating your garden, or the squirrels or the rabbits. We're going to deal with plants only. We're going to have some definitions. We're going to talk about why would you want to forage? Why even bother? We're going to cover the rules of foraging, what is available, especially here in Virginia, because that's where that's where we all live. I know some of you on this Zoom may be from other states, but we are going to cover what's here in Virginia and in Northern Virginia and available, and also uses and some recipes. All right. The term forage has many meanings, but for our purposes, we're going to have it mean hunting and gathering edible wild plants. Well, there's 2 other terms, edible and wild, and we'll get to those. And bear in mind, you don't have to go far afield to forage. Some of your best foraging may be in your own area. And for those of you that have single family houses or townhouses, it might be in your own backyard. So what is wild? Well, again, for our purposes, wild is going to mean plants that weren't planted intentionally or something that wasn't planted by a person. Squirrels are always planting things. Other animals are planting things. Birds poop out seeds and they grow. So wild means something that's not planted by a person. So again, it could be in your own, on your own property. And what do we mean by edible? Well, there's the joke that almost everything is edible once. I mean, if you wanted to eat rat poison, it's edible, but it's probably going to make you very sick, if not kill you. So for our purposes, we mean edible as in fit to be eaten, something that's good for you. And moreover, we mean tasty and nutritious. So bear that in mind as we go along. Let's see. All right, so why forage? Well, the big reason is it's free food. It's free and local food. And what can be better than that, as long as it's edible? Right now, during the coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the need for food rise exponentially. I mean, the grocery stores, most of them are getting a little bit back to normal, but our local food banks, I was just on a call yesterday, and they're now seeing about 5,000 families a week. And that's gone up from 2,000 before everything went crazy. So there are many, many, many people in this country that are food insecure and really need to know where to get their next meal. And foraging can actually help if you know what's edible and what's good for you. So during the coronavirus, it's really valuable to have some foraging expertise. It also gives you an enhanced connection to nature. You'll hopefully after this talk, you'll be looking around at different flowers and different plants and saying, oh, yeah, I remember that they talked about that. And you might see a little weed growing in the crack of the sidewalk and say, oh, I know what that is. And you might not want to eat it because the foot traffic on the sidewalk, but at least you'll know what it is. And another reason to know about foraging is the need. You might be on a walk, you might be on a hike and get a little peckish and not want to dig in your backpack. So you could just reach over. If there's some wood sorrel, you can take a little few leaves and chew on that. Trail nibbles is what they call it. And if you get yourself in a bad way, heaven forbid, foraging skills can help you survive. So let's talk about nutrition. Unlike the vegetables and fruits that we get at the grocery store, and unlike the greens that we might be growing in our own gardens, the wild plants, the weeds that we see on our property and in the areas that we walk, those weeds have to still fight to live. They have to duke it out with other plants that are in their area. They have to fight to win. And in order to fight, they develop these phytochemicals, and they contain micronutrients that help them shove the other plants away and to get their advantage, get that little bit of sunlight or whatever it is they need to survive. We've bred that out. We have coddled our grocery store greens and vegetables and the things that we grow in our garden. We water them, we feed them, we're so nice to them. So they don't have those same phytochemicals, or not the amounts that these wild edible plants have. So those phytochemicals that are in edible wild plants are nutritious for us. It's also really good for us to have some diversity in our diet. I was just taking my vitamins before the talk. It's just something I do every day. But a lot of people that forage more regularly and more seriously than I do, they get more than enough of their daily requirements just from the variety of plants that they eat every day. So they can be very nutritious for us. And the last thing is availability. Here in Virginia, we are blessed. The state offers a superb amount of year-round foraging. There are some important rules of foraging. The first one is honor the law. Most of our public lands, city, county parks, state parks, national parks, they don't want us to take anything out. And that makes sense because that is a public area and they want it left the same for the next person that comes along. If the first person came in and tore out all the raspberry bushes or took out all the blueberries or something that they saw, then there'd be nothing left for anyone else to see or for the animals that live there to eat. So honor the law. Be sure that you know it's legal for you to take something out of a public area. Honor the law. Don't trespass on private property. Wear your mask. Go up and ask permission if you see something on somebody's property that you'd like to try or that you'd like to forage. So honor the law. Another one is honor the plant. Be sure you know what the plant is and what parts are edible before you pick it, and especially before you ingest it. Also, don't take, if you find a patch of, well, let's say ramps. Ramps are a very popular onion relative that it's a very popular foraged plant, and they're getting foraged out. That we're running out of ramps because they're so popular. So if you see a patch of ramps, don't dig them all up. Take the leaves and leave the bulb in the ground, because if you take the bulb, you're taking the entire plant, and ramps take a long time to reestablish and grow. They're pretty fragile little guys. So honor the plant that way. Honor the land. Try to leave the site better than you found it. If there's litter, pick it up. If you got foraging bags or something that are blown around, pick them up. If you dig a hole, fill it in. So honor the land, and especially honor yourself. We're going to talk about this over and over, but really be sure you know what you're getting into or what you're picking before you eat it. It's a common thing with new foragers or even experienced foragers. We want to see what we want to see. We want it to be the edible variety. We want it to be the thing we can eat, but it sometimes isn't. So make sure you know before you eat it. Here's an example. The picture here is a mayapple. This little thing here is a bud. It's not even flowered. I took this picture about a month ago and the flower hadn't quite erupted. But this little flower will develop into a fruit. And turtles and other critters like these little fruits. And they are toxic to humans until the fruit is ripe. And that might be the end of July or even later. And the fruit may have fallen onto the ground. It should have turned yellow. It'll be very soft and it'll be aromatic. That's the only time that people can safely eat the plant, or the fruit, I mean, not the plant. And do not eat the seeds. You can Google mayapple and you'll probably find this edible Manhattan story that talks about someone that had this happen to her, where she was waiting and waiting for it to become ripe, and then she ended up eating the seeds, and so she made herself lose the mayapple and the seeds, and she was okay. But just make sure you know what's edible. Be nice to yourself. Try small amounts first. If it's a new plant to you, we can all react to different things. Some of us have peanut allergies. You never know until you try it. So again, more foraging do's and don'ts. Do be respectful of others' property. Don't ingest anything that you're not certain is safe to eat. Do learn to identify edible plants and understand their part in the larger ecosystem. Maybe you see a plant and you say, oh, I know that's indicative of a distressed and disturbed area, because that's what seems to take over here. Don't forage where cars are parked. Don't forage too close to old buildings that may contain lead paint. Lead paint can leach into whatever you're about to eat, so that's not good. Don't forage where herbicides or pesticides have been used. And again, the rule of thumb, when in doubt, leave it out. So we are hoping that this just sparks your curiosity, this one about learning to identify edible plants. You're going to get a taste of foraging today, pardon the pun, and we hope that you will want to do some more research. We're going to give you some resources, some books and things that we have found useful, and hopefully that sparks some interest in you. We are not health experts. We don't pretend to be. We want you to use common sense take small amounts first. If you are at all unsure, just don't try it. And remember that natural does not mean edible. That just because you find something out in nature doesn't mean that it's good for you. We are surrounded by toxic plants. Y-E-W, yew is a toxic plant. And a lot of us have it in our landscaping. My beloved rhubarb. I love rhubarb. The leaves are toxic. The stalks are delicious. So just know what you're eating, know what parts are edible, and know that just because another animal that you saw ate something doesn't mean that you can or you should. The turtles will be eating those May apples as soon as they appear. They don't care if they're not ripe. They'll start eating them and they'll be fine. But we will get very sick if we do that. And it's the same. Catbirds love the berries of pokeweed, but they're not good for us. So don't eat pokeweed berries. And again, just because you see an animal eating it doesn't mean that we can. So what's available in Virginia? Well, in the spring and summer, there's a lot of shoots, plants, fruits, and flowers. In the fall and winter, there's fruits, nuts, and roots. And our talk today is going to be divided into 3 parts. I'm going to talk about weeds and berries. Jane is going to talk about edible flowers, and Puwen is going to talk about bamboo. So wonderful weeds. I know that's a demeaning term, and some people get angry at me for calling these wonderful plants weeds, but I think it's a little endearing. I'm a gardener, and I was out weeding my yard, and I could not believe here in Northern Virginia, the chickweed this year just went crazy. It was carpeting my lawn, and I was pulling it out by the handfuls, and I was like, oh, look, I can eat this. So this is chickweed. It's a little late here for chickweed. This was growing in some shade, and it's a happy, happy little plant. Dandelions, one of the best known edible weeds that we have, and an early nectar plant for some of our emerging pollinators. Excuse me, every part, the flower is edible, the leaves are edible, the root is edible. It's a little bitter, and you can always tell there's a lot of dandelion lookalikes. And the dandelion, if you turn the leaf over, the underside of the leaf, the vein, that main vein, is smooth. That means it's a dandelion. That's the sure way to tell it's a dandelion, because there's lookalikes that will have the yellow flower, they'll have serrated leaves, but they're not necessarily dandelions. The little secret here is a lot of those lookalikes are still edible, but it's best to know exactly what it is before you try it. And another one here I've got pictured is the broadleaf plantain, which I'm just now starting to see in my yard. This is a rather modest sized leaf, but in the Civil War, this has had a lot of uses. It's got a few medicinal purposes as well. It is edible, especially when it's young like this and still tender. I've made broadleaf plantain fritters, just put them in a little batter and fry them up, anything fried. You can bake them as well. You can put some batter on them and bake them. You can add them to a salad. They're still pliable enough. They're a little fibrous. They've got some veins running all the way through the leaf, but a very nice spring edible. So here are some that I weeded in my yard early. We've got the prickly lettuce. Again, it's very much like the dandelion, except when you turn these leaves over, they'll have little hairs along them, and that's indicative of a dandelion look-alike. Prickly lettuce, it is edible. We have the chickweed that I showed you. We've got purple dead nettle. Now that's a terrible name, and it sounds like, oh, it's got to be bad for you. No, it's called dead nettle because people thought it resembled the stinging nettle, but this one doesn't have a sting, so they called it dead nettle because it had no sting to it. All right, the dandelion and the hairy bittercress. Boy, have we been dealing with that this year. The leaves down here are very peppery, like watercress, bittercress, and quite delicious. I'm a real fan of bittercress. When I'm out pulling it out of my yard, I'm often ingesting a few leaves at the same time. And here's a pesto that I made from this. And this is the website where I found the recipe that I used. I highly recommend the Nitty Gritty Life. I liked her website because she went through at the end, she goes through a whole litany of some of the different plants that you can put into the pesto, and she describes them in greater detail. So it's a nice site. So here's a few of our favorite weeds, and you can read that for yourself. Lamb's quarter is starting in now. This is a little tiny baby lamb's quarter. Can you see it here? So they call it goosefoot. And here in the age of the coronavirus, what better thing to do to avoid going to the grocery store if you are short? I mean, a lot of us are cooking more, right? And so we don't want to go to the grocery store any more than we have to. And you certainly don't want to go to the grocery store for just one or two items. You want to make sure that you go there once every 2 weeks or so, get what you need and get out. So if you're cooking a recipe and you say, oh, I don't have any spinach, I need spinach for this, or I need some greens for this. Well, you might be able to go out in your yard or in your environs and find lamb's quarter. It's a great substitute for greens, for spinach, very nutritious. My great aunt, growing up in the farms of Missouri, they would go out in the field and intentionally harvest this for their meals. So it's something that our forebears depended on, and it's very nutritious, and it will help you avoid going to the grocery store very possibly. You can use these fresh or some of them cooked. A lot of them are better fresh. I think wood sorrel is definitely better fresh. And sometimes you can just use them, you can bake your pizza and then put them on top, like put some chickweed or some plantain or something on top fresh. Just like in Italy, they sometimes put arugula, just fresh arugula on top of a pizza, and you eat it and you get your salad and your pizza at the same time. So let's go on to the next one. So berries. Here's some pictures of berries. This I think is wineberry. It's got the red stem, and oh my gosh, you can't really see the prickles, but boy, it's got terrible prickles. But it's an invasive, but it is really good. And this mulberry, the mulberries are just starting to ripen. I went out to take some pictures. I'm glad I had this from previous years, because the trees are, the fruit is just starting to redden, and you really want them when they're dark like this. And then this one over here, these are service berries, and they're also just starting to come in now. Probably in Northern Virginia, it'll probably be another week, maybe two, before these ripen. We are getting some really warm weather coming in, so it might happen sooner. Berries are usually most nutritious when they're eaten raw. You can put them into smoothies. And I should have said that with the weeds. You can make green smoothies with the different edible plants as well. So berries are great additions for smoothies. You can use them in baking or just add them to your cereal in the morning or on your ice cream at night. The one exception to the more nutritious when they're raw are blueberries, believe it or not. I just learned that when I was doing some research for this, that blueberries are one of the few berries that's actually had more available nutrition when they're cooked. So, you know, gives you an excuse to make blueberry pie, right? And these are some resources. I'll just point out one of my very favorites. I don't like calling myself or anyone else an idiot, but the Idiot's Guide to Foraging was really a good resource for me. I really have enjoyed this book. And the reason is because it's got great photographs, and he includes some lookalikes that you'll want to avoid. So each plant, if it has something that's toxic and looks like it, he'll point that out, and there'll be pictures side by side so you can see, okay, this one is this thing and this is that thing. This is the one I want. So it's a really good introductory book for beginning foragers. I also like the backyard foraging and the front yard foraging because that's where I personally do most of mine. Okay, I think I whipped through that pretty quick, but do we have any questions coming in?
Becky, one thing somebody asked is if you would show the plants a little closer to the screen when you, if any more plants are going to be shown, if you could hold them up a little bit closer.
Okay, that's the chickweed. Yeah, I don't want it to blur out, but that's the chickweed. And that's the lamb's quarter. All right.
Okay, Becky, there's a question about pesticides. Specifically, the question is, should we be concerned about pesticide runoff or pollution from cars on land where we might be foraging?
Yeah, when you're picking berries, I have friends that they advise never to pick berries near a highway or near a really busy road, because if there's, I mean, most of our cars run on unleaded gas now, but if there's vehicles that use diesel, or there's trucks and stuff that are still using leaded gas, that can leach into the berries. Berries are one of the fruits that really sucks up the toxins and things. They concentrate it somehow. So I would try to avoid foraging for berries if it's right alongside a roadway. And unfortunately, that's where you sometimes find them, but just bear that in mind.
So the second question is related to that also, and we have a question about whether or not you could share suggestions about where to forage near Arlington. The writer says that they live in a dense area. The only places around me are community parks where it may be frowned upon to forage past the possible pesticides in use.
Yeah, that's always the golden question, because foragers, some of them get very proprietary about where they find their stash. I know there's mulberry trees. There's one near me. I live on Sycamore Street in Arlington, and my neighbor has one that she invites everyone to pick from. And Sycamore is one of those, it's, you know, it's sort of a traveled street, but right now, no, not so much. And so I don't, without knowing specifically where everyone lives, it's really hard to say, yeah, try here. Like I say, most of mine is done in my own yard. And there are, I mean, I take walks along some of the bike paths, and sometimes there's little ways to worm into the woods, and that might be. I know that there's blackberries found. It's too early for blackberries, so you can't go out now and find them, but they're on along some of the bike paths. I know there's some good blackberry brambles.
And finally, there's one related question, one last question here. Are there dangerous berries or lookalikes in the area that people should be aware about? Is there anything that looks like blueberries, for instance, that's poisonous?
Well, it depends on what your frame of reference is. I mean, I can't think of an example. I know pokeweed berries are not edible, but blueberries to me look like blueberries, so I don't know what would look like them that wouldn't be good. I'm sorry.
Well, certainly the service berries do look like little baby blueberries, but they are they're very edible, aren't they?
Yeah, they have a longer stem. They almost look like a combination of a blueberry and a cherry because they have a longer stem on them. But yeah, when they're picked, yes, they look like large red blueberries. That's a good point. And service berries are very edible, very good for you. They're excellent.
And they're also called June berries, aren't they?
Yes, shadberries, June berries. Because usually they're ripe in June. I think it's going to be a little early this year because of our weather.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Now we have Jane Longan, who is going, oh, was that it for the questions for now? Yeah, okay. Now we have Jane Longan, who's going to talk to us about edible flowers. Jane.
Hi, welcome. If you are just joining us, this is the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia with Virginia Cooperative Extension program. And I think my screen just did a, there. I'm going to be talking about edible flowers, and I'm going to start with violets. There was just a question about where can you forage, but if you have a yard, you may have violets. I don't. I set the lawnmower blade at about 4 inches, and I don't use herbicides, and I don't try to take the violets out of the grass. So they're beautiful, and I had a lot. This was a great year for violets. Becky, do you want to next? So violets, you can eat the flowers and the leaves. The stems are not that good. I tried them again this morning to verify, and just go with the flowers and the leaves. Pick violets right before you eat them because they will wilt. And they're best when they're young and fresh. Violets are beautiful made into syrup. They can be tossed raw in salads, and the flowers can be candied. And you can freeze violets in an ice cube tray and then add the ice cubes to your summer drinks. And I'm gonna see if I can hold up this beautiful ice cube that Puwen made. Let's see. Can you see this ice cube? She put redbud in the ice cube tray. And Becky, the next slide, please. So that's what you can do, and we'll talk about redbuds next. But you can make a beautiful, simple syrup out of violets. And you should pick them in the morning when they're fresh. And for this syrup, it's best to pick the deepest purple in your yard. Even if you have the white, gray, or lavender, you want them to be really dark. And it's important to separate the calyx, which is the green base of the flower, from the flowers, because the calyx is bitter, and maybe even more importantly, when you mix green and purple, you get kind of a muddy look. So it would not make a pretty syrup. Becky? So that is a violet syrup made from about 2 cups of violets. In the middle is a cocktail that is made with the syrup. And I think that we should think of a good name for a cocktail, a violet syrup cocktail in the age of coronavirus. So if anyone has ideas, I'd be interested. And you can also pour the syrup over your yogurt or ice cream. Violets are just so easy and pretty, and we all need that now. You can put a violet on a shortbread cookie. You can pop your, this is a tuna wrap, and violets can be tossed into a salad. The picture on the right shows miner's lettuce with violets, and that is redbud in the center. So this is the eastern redbud tree, and it is a beautiful native understory tree in our area. And nature is full of mimics, and sometimes in bad ways. There was a question about what plants might mimic something that we can eat, and there might be a poison lookalike, which is often the case. But in this case, it's a magical mimicry. If you don't know this, I'm so happy to share it with you. And I saw in the chat room that Thomas, you were watching this with your 8-year-old son while you're staying home. And I hope both of you will look, and all of you. On the lower left, there are 2 buds. And can you see the hummingbirds? well, I can't hear if you can, but they're just, the little buds are so beautiful, and they do mimic hummingbirds. Okay. Dandelions are, Becky did talk about dandelions, and I think she also said that it is oft maligned forager's friend, because all parts of the dandelion are edible. The beautiful yellow blossom can be used in salads. You can cook with it, bake with it. The leaves can be eaten raw or sauteed like spinach, and even the roots. And dandelions have a very long taproot, which most of you try to know if you've been weeding. But if you get the taproot out, you can scrape off the edge. Of course, you can't peel it because I don't think you'd have anything left. Scrape it, slice it, and boil it in salted water. And again, this is a reminder for safety in foraging. Remember not to pick where dogs are walked or cars are parked. And so this is an example of the dandelion that I would not use in, I would not pick it, I would leave it. So here's what you can do with dandelion blossoms. You can use the whole flower and turn it face down on a pancake or a crepe, and it's just beautiful. And I think in these times, we're home, we have more time, we can be creative, and we all need beauty. So again, I'm going to talk about teas, syrups, and flavored vinegars. And in the photo, you can see the violets, the dandelion, and to the left, that is anise hyssop, which is such a wonderful, it's such a wonderful plant. It's in the mint family, and I have some here, so let's see if that works. Let's see. Can you see this? That's anise hyssop, and it has these little tiny purple flowers that you can toss in salads. And the leaves themselves are so fragrant that if you just brush the leaf in your fingers, it releases this really pleasant kind of licorice smell. And if you eat them, if you've ever had Good and Plenty, you should try an anise hyssop leaf, because they really do taste like Good and Plenty that you used to get at the movie theater. Next slide, please. So stinging nettle is one of the most wild plants I'm going to talk about today, because I've not had this in my own yard, but I went foraging with Natalie Carver from Love and Carrots, and she made this beautiful sun tea with the foraged stinging nettle. It's and it's great hot, so you can just put your leaves in, pour boiling water over, you can strain it out, and it's like drinking asparagus. It's such a good flavor, and at the end of winter, it's something that you really want to have sort of in your system. Stinging nettle does sting, so you have to wear gloves when you forage it. Sumac is a bright red berry that makes a delicious tart lemonade-like drink. And as many of you probably know, ground sumac is used in a lot of Middle Eastern cooking. You can grind the dried berries, which are actually called drupes, and use it as a rub on lamb or other meats. Sumac has an acid coating on the berries that gives it its really tart, lemony flavor. It's a combination of acids coating each individual drupe, but when it rains, that gets washed away, so they will lose most of their flavor. If you want to forage sumac, watch the weather and get it before it rains. You want to look for fresh, just right, bright red berries. And people always ask about poison sumac when they hear this. They share the same common name, but sumacs with red berries are safe to eat. And poison sumac has small white berries that you will not confuse, and as the name suggests, you do not want to ingest. I'm putting this photo in because here's sumac in New York City on the High Line. It's autumn in New York, and you can see what a beautiful small tree it is. So you can make sumac aid from sumac berries, and you can just put them in. Lukewarm would be the warmest I would use. You just need to put them in water, and for about 6 hours, you want to release that that acid coating on the berries. So you really want to. You can even put your hands in and kind of roll them around, and then you need to strain the berries. And a strainer can be your best friend. And you also want to strain through either cheesecloth, or you can use a paper towel if you need, or even a coffee filter. And it makes a beautiful drink. You'll want to sweeten it a little bit. And once you have the sumac liquid, you can make sumac jelly, which is very delicious, as evidenced by this jelly that won the 2015 Reserve Champion at the Arlington County Fair. Another thing you can do is make a vinegar, and this is made with red and white clovers. Red clover is used as a cover crop in the winter, and it fixes nitrogen and is good for the soil. White clover, again, like dandelion and violets, you probably have white clover in your yard. The dried flowers can be made into a tea or baked into bread, and we're baking a lot of bread these days, I understand, so you might want to try that. And I've heard, but I haven't had a problem, but the raw clover can be difficult to digest, but the flowers can be scattered into salads or strewn over dip. Again, you want to use moderation. Try something in moderation the first time, introduce it gradually, and see if you have a reaction. But so you can fill a jar with the blossoms, pour white vinegar and a little bit of honey over the flowers, leave it covered on the counter for a week, and strain it, and you'll have a really great vinegar for salad dressings and vinaigrettes. Flowers for salads. This is a beautiful salad that was made by fellow master gardener Katrina Van Dyne. It's so colorful. It has, that's a nasturtium in the middle, the biggest flower, the orange. There is, the orange is calendula, and there is, I think that's borage is the blue. Next. Bee balm. Last week in Alyssa Morell's presentation, she talked about what a pollinator magnet bee balm is. It's in the mint family, and so it has the characteristic square stem. And again, for those of you who are watching from home and maybe talking to kids, I love that you can tell people that plants in the mint family have square stems, and if you rub it between your fingers, you can really see that. So I'm gonna, let's see, I don't know if you can see how square that is, but the petals can be added to salads, or you can strew them across deviled eggs. The young leaves are also delicious in a salad, and it's interesting. The bee balm makes a really delicious tea, and it was not taxed by the British, so it was used a lot by the colonists. Arugula blossoms have been mentioned several times, I think, and they are so delicious. I think I had one of those. They're in my yard now. I planted arugula in a salad mix, and it is getting warmer, and so it has gone to seed, and so it's a peppery, really delicious taste, and it also is pretty. And this in the bottom left, if you could go back, Becky, the bottom left is so cute because at the Arlington Farmers Market a few years ago, obviously not now, but there was a young entrepreneurial vendor's helper who was selling these arugula blossoms for $1.50 a bag. He says, spice up your salads and stir fries. And I love his little sign in the corner that says, eco-organic. Okay. Wood sorrel we've talked about, and it's also very lemony. Some people consider this the gateway foraging plant because when you bite off the little yellow flowers or the leaves, it is so tangy lemony. This picture is another good reminder for safety when foraging because I would not forage this plant. It is in a asphalt parking lot, and you don't know. Well, of course, you wouldn't pick this one, and it doesn't look very fresh. Another reminder about when you're picking is that you have to be, you really have to be mindful and be safe. But here's a beautiful yellow wood sorrel put again on shortbread cookies. Easy thing to do now when you're at home. And this just shows another edible. If you planted peas in your garden and they should be coming up and trying to climb their supports, this is the pea shoot flower. And you can see all the squiggly stems, and it's just, yeah, thanks Becky for showing that. And it's just, the flower is beautiful. Next. These are some of my favorite books on foraging, and we can provide a list of our book recommendations. I'll just point out the Ewell Gibbons, Stalking the Good Life. Some of you may remember Ewell Gibbons. He did commercials for grape nuts in the 70s, I think it was. But he's really considered the father of modern foraging. And if you can find any of his old books, his most famous book was called Stalking the Wild Asparagus, but his writing style is charming, and there's a lot of really good information. And the book second from the bottom is Wild Urban Plants by Peter Del Tredici. And Becky, you can, next slide. This is a field guide, and I really like this book, especially if you're still learning your plant ID. I'll know foraging in the age of coronavirus is a different time for us, and we're all having to make adjustments and substitutions, and I think that this mullein plant should be the 22 plant of the year. It is called flannel leaf, and Becky taught me this, that it's also called cowboy toilet paper. So say no more. And it's just a good reminder that in these times, we all know that toilet paper is in short supply. Maybe we wish we had a lemon, but we can substitute with sumac berry or wood sorrel. It's a good time to try new things and learn to adjust. Next. This is the end, but this is toilet paper, cowboy toilet paper, made from mullein, handcrafted and locally sourced by Becky Halbe in 2020. And let's see, Becky, can you come on? Because I think Becky was gonna.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, Becky, with your demo.
Okay, I did it a couple times, but maybe people didn't see me. So this is these are mullein leaves. They're quite large, and I just stitched them together onto a toilet paper roll. And yeah, if I run out, I'm in good hands.
Thanks, Becky.
Okay, do we have time for some questions?
Couple.
All right, Jane, there's a question about violets, and are the yellow, white violets as good to eat as the purple ones?
Yes, I think so. It's just that the purple, I showed the purple because it makes that beautiful deep purple syrup. So the purple violets, the nice thing about those is that it really is beautiful.
That's lovely. All right, so they are edible, the yellow and white ones, right?
Yes.
I have some lemon balm growing in my yard, and I know that it has some good properties. For me, it's a little bit cloying in its taste, but we have another person that does garden talks that she does a talk on medicinal herbs, and lemon balm features prominently. I don't know all the specifics about it, but I know that some people value it very highly.
Similar question about anise hyssop.
Anise hyssop?
Anise hyssop, yes.
I have just enjoyed it as an edible. I like the taste of anise. So for me, I don't know, I can't say what the actual vitamins or minerals or whatever that it provides. It is in the mint family. The flowers are edible, and so are the leaves. It's nice to put just a little canapé, have a cracker with some goat cheese, and then a anise hyssop leaf on top. If you don't
Great.
like the taste of anise, it's pretty strong.
Great. The other question is about nettles. Are all species of nettles edible? Do you know?
I wouldn't be comfortable saying all about anything. Purple dead nettle is edible, and stinging nettle, if you harvest it carefully, it is edible.
And there is quite a bit of conversation on the chat box about buttercups, and I do want to stress that the information that is out there is that buttercup is poisonous, it's toxic.
You don't eat it.
Very
No.
important. Okay, I think we're ready to move on then.
And now we've got Puwen to talk to us about bamboo.
Good morning, everyone, from my kitchen. Before I get started, when Jane mentioned sumac, coincidentally, I grew up in Michigan on a dirt road called Sumac Lane, and we did forage sumac berries so that we could make pink lemonade during the summer months, but we also picked grapes and hickory nuts and walnuts, and I remember going out on the day of the moon landing and picking a gallon of blackberries and making blackberry pie to bring over to our neighbors so we could watch the moon landing all together. So foraging actually has been in my blood. When I came to Virginia from Michigan in the mid-'80s, it was a different climate. It was hot and humid in May. Totally different landscape and different plants. There were pawpaw and cowpeas and figs and barbecue and country music. But one plant that really intrigued me was bamboo, and it was growing all over. For landscape people and for extension service, bamboo is really considered an invasive. It is so persistent, but for foragers like myself, I think it's edible and pretty incredible. Next. So bamboo is native on all continents except for Antarctica and in Europe. It's been used as a source of food and for a variety of surprising products in many, many cultures. So I'm just demonstrating here showing you on the different photos. This is scaffolding in Hong Kong. Bamboo is used extensively for scaffolding there. It could be a 20, 30 story building that they use it for. It's a renewable resource. It's fast to put up and fast to take down, faster than other types of scaffolding. In the middle is a photo that I took at the Kennedy Center around Chinese New Year's. They had a huge celebration there for the Lunar New Year, and they had invited a 20-piece bamboo orchestra from Beijing to come in, and they played everything from flutes and a tiny, tiny little piccolo, this long, to gongs and other percussive instruments. So that was really quite an amazing use of bamboo. And then on the right, bamboo socks, which have been touted for their antibacterial qualities. So there are many, many other uses. I actually, in preparing for this talk, I was looking around the house, gathering up things that I have at home made out of bamboo. Oops, sorry, I missed this one. Bamboo has also been a source of inspiration to people in East Asia. In China, it's considered a symbol for people who have high moral integrity and who are also modest, because of course bamboo is very plain on the outside. And it's a source of inspiration for artists as well. So this is a painting at the Freer downtown by Wu Zhen, who was a Yuan Dynasty painter, called Bamboo in the Wind. And here are the items that I gathered from home. So we'll start on the left. There are chopsticks, much worn, and rice scoopers, and the handle for a spider for frying foods and things like that. Let's see, bamboo clothespins, the handle of a bamboo broom, steamer. Yeah, that's a multi-stack steamer. I actually found that bamboo steamers work better than metal steamers because if you're cooking something like a dumpling or something like that, the steam is actually absorbed into the body of the steamer top, instead of having it fall back down onto your food. So I think ergonomically it works really well. There are colanders there that are nesting. I use those all the time. A basket that I brought back from China, and I had to fit it underneath the front seat of the airplane, which was kind of difficult. And then in the foreground, there's a bamboo flute, some clappers that are used in Chinese music to imitate horses galloping. And also you'll see, if you watch Beijing opera, which is kind of hard on the ear, when there is a battle scene, they'll use bamboo clappers. And then the other thing that I have here is a little toy that I picked up in the 80s when I went to China. And the handle is bamboo. And I want to show as well, the size of bamboo varies and the uses vary. So here you've got, actually, these are things that you can find in any hardware store in China. This is made from a section of bamboo. And I've seen it in people's kitchens, and they'll just put their wet chopsticks in, and there's some drain holes in the bottom. For myself, I put pencils or a toothbrush in the bathroom into that. And then here are the smaller things. These are Chinese brushes. And this is a piece of bamboo the size of a pencil. Okay, so going on. And then for us gardeners, you can forage bamboo in your neighbors or in your own backyard. And this is my yard where I've made a teepee for the beans. And I use a bamboo rake, and I've, in the past cold spell, the iris was just coming out, and I thought, how am I going to throw something over the flowers? So I put bamboo in as stakes, and it held up the tent that I had actually created. And it's a great stake for flowers that are heavy on top. So, okay. So bamboo is found on all, as I said, all continents except for Antarctica and Europe. And there are over 1,000 species. There are two common species that are foraged and eaten here in the United States. One is the golden bamboo, and the other is something called bambusa. It's apparently less common. It's a perennial evergreen grass, belongs to the grass family, and it is, these are the characteristics of it. So Becky, if you could show, there's the culm is actually, it's a multi-jointed stalk that grows. So they're the culms, and then these terminate, start and finish with a solid node in the middle. And from the nodes grow the branches and the leaves. So, and here's an example. This is why, well, this is an example, a diagram of a rhizome of a type of, there are two types of bamboo, those that clump, that are more controllable, and those that have a running habit. And so here's the diagram of the running habit. It's very much like wiregrass that we've battled at several of the gardens in Arlington. And let me show, I don't know, Becky, if you can show this. So what's happening with the rhizome is exactly what happens above in the culm, but because you have these nodes and the joints, but instead of having branches and leaves come out, you are having roots and also these new shoots. And the new shoots are what I've been harvesting locally. And here's an example. I don't know where I got this from, but it was this is showing how the root system grows from the rhizome. And you can see these little sections. You can see the culm, the eventual culm, and the internodes, the nodes. So I'm going to talk about bamboo as food and foraged food. Most commonly, you'll go to Giant or Safeway, and you go to the Asian aisle, and you'll find Dynasty sliced bamboo shoots. Sometimes if you go to the Asian store, grocery stores, of which we're lucky to have many, you will see, and maybe not so often now, but you'll see bamboo shoots that are in vats of water that you can purchase by the pound. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about foraging for bamboo in urban settings, and talking about the size of the roots, the shoots that you harvest, the dates for harvesting in Northern Virginia, and the best time of day to harvest. And then finally, talking about how to prepare the shoots to remove a toxin that's present in the shoot. And before that, I just wanted to show you this. This is most incredible, huge shoots that were in a market in Japan. There are two types of bamboo that are eaten and sold. One is called the winter bamboo, which is actually dug out of the ground. And then there are the spring shoots, the new shoots that I'll be talking about, that are the ones that emerge from above the soil. Okay, so this is one that I foraged in a friend's yard. We've been going there for several years to get poles, in the spring. And when I first approached her, I don't know who was happier, that she, her getting us to go in and do free labor to eliminate the bamboo, or us, because we were able to get tens of poles for structures. But anyway, so this was a shoot that we harvested in early May this year. It ran the whole season, and they call it the shooting season among foragers in Northern Virginia seems to run for about a week and a half in early May. Some years when I've been busy, I'll actually find that there's nothing left. And so, yeah, that's fine. And this is what, on our second foraging trip, we brought home. The shoots are about maybe 1 to 2 inches in diameter or more. And then they could be anything from this, maybe 4 inches tall to up to maybe 1.5 feet. And so here's a short video of my husband peeling off the sheath of the bamboo. There's a really tough sheath on the outside that layers itself around. It's very beautiful, actually. And you have to take your hand. I've seen pictures in videos of Chinese. I don't know how they do it, but they actually put a knife in it and twist it. I have no idea how you can do it in one single blow. But you just need to, it's like opening up a shrimp shell. You put your fingers out and then you just take it off like this. So it's successive layers of the sheath. And you get down to a very creamy white interior. And this is the result of that. The bottoms are, the very bottoms where it was green, we found that it was still a bit tough, and so I cut that off, just like you would do an asparagus where it's tough on the bottom. And then the top itself is also tough, so you want to take that off as well. I just used a knife to do that. And you need, as I said, there's a toxin present in the shoots, so you trim the ends and then you put them into some boiling water. And the toxin, what happens with this is, I don't have the name of it, like cassava, like beans, like kidney beans and lima beans, there is a toxin present in the plant itself that can be dissipated and removed through heating. And in the case of bamboo shoots, people boil the shoots. In Japan, I understand that they actually put rice bran into the boiling water, or even use, because people eat a lot of rice there, they actually use the rinse water from the rice. And that somehow the characteristic of the property of the rice is that it draws out the toxin faster. I think actually, if I were to do this again, I would just throw in a 1/4 cup of rice with the water and achieve the same effect. So boil it for twice and then drain it using your bamboo colander. And here are the final bamboo shoots, ready to cook. So the first, I think this is where we are. You can go on. They're ready to slice and put into a dish. And so there are 3, if you were in my kitchen at my house over the past 2 weeks, I made 3 dishes from bamboo. One was using the shoot, one was using the leaves, although the leaves were purchased at a store. And then the third one was using the pole itself. So this is the first dish that I made with the shoots, and that was the mushu, maybe go back. Some mushu vegetables. And I, instead of putting meat or anything like that, I used bamboo shoots, shiitake mushrooms. I actually have some growing on a log outside, but I was not going to use those. So I used dried ones. And then shredded cabbage and carrots and something called muar, which is a tree ear fungus, which I think we can actually pick if we could find it locally. Lily buds, which will be coming into season soon, and scallions. And you can actually just get a tortilla and wrap it up. And then here's the Chinese version of stuffed grape leaves. In this case, I used bamboo leaves as the wrapper, and then put in sticky rice and shiitake mushrooms and some marinated chicken, and then steamed it. They make really handy bundles, personalized bundles. The leaves, because the leaves here from the bamboo that I harvest are so tiny, I actually go to the store and purchase dried bamboo leaves. And you soak them overnight, and then you can use them. They become pliable, and you can use them for wrapping. So you can imagine how big the bamboo was that these leaves came from. And then the third dish was something that I've been really wanting to do for the past 20, 25 years. The first time I tasted it was at the Serena Satay. It was an Indonesian restaurant on Wisconsin Avenue in Georgetown. And we had curries and everything, and then gado salad. And then there was a tube of really delicious rice that was sticky and chewy. And I've been waiting for time, and this quarantine has allowed me the time to experiment and do this. So it's basically 2-3 ingredients: sticky rice, coconut cream or coconut milk, and your bamboo pole. So what you do is you soak your rice overnight, you line it with a banana leaf, and this is what is shown, this big green leaf here that you can get in the frozen section of Asian stores. That was the advice from the recipe that I found online, but I actually found that you don't need to line it. And so if you try to do this, it's really quite a process, but there's actually a pith. I don't know if you can see inside of the bamboo here. I'll pull it up. See this? This is edible. There are actually dishes that the Chinese have invented that just use the pith of the bamboo. I was telling Becky that people who play Chinese flutes actually use a piece of that pith and put it on one of the holes of the flute, the extra hole, to create a vibrato. But in any case, this pith will actually keep the rice from sticking to the inside of the pole. So you really don't need to go through to all the effort of lining it with the banana leaf. But that's what I did. I lined it with a banana leaf, and then I spooned in the rice. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a really good saw and a pruning saw, and it'll be fresh, and you would cut below the node. You remember the nodes are solid, so you would cut below the node. And I found that the shorter pieces are easier to cook. And then you spoon in your rice, and you fill it with the coconut cream, and then you plug it. And what I did initially was I used some more of the banana leaf to plug it. But I'm thinking now that if I were to do this again, I would put a plug of sweet potato or some other vegetable that would be able to cork it. And so that's what you do. You build your fire. Here's my Weber grill. And it was still a little bit, the milk was coming out, so I propped it up, and I kept on turning the pole, the stuffed pole. 20 minutes, and then it was ready to eat. And I took a machete and I hacked open and there's the result. So that's the end of my talk. One thing that I'm looking forward to, I think, when Becky does weeds, this is what I did last year in our presentation, was I made mochi using Artemisia wormwood that was in my yard. This was an intentional planting on my part, but boy, do I regret it now. So are there any questions?
Yes. And there's a question about the leaves, the bamboo leaves.
Yeah.
Are the bamboo leaves themselves edible?
I think you'd have a lot of fiber. No, you know, just like the sheath, this sheath on the outside, it's very tough. I've never tried to eat it. The one thing I've never tried, I think the whole plant is potentially edible, except, let's put it this way. I've read that there are 120 edible varieties of bamboo in the world. But what that means is not that they're, you know, I think once they're processed, every one of them, if you could digest it, would be edible. But some bamboo are only like 3 inches tall, okay? And some of no, it's not edible. I'll just say it's not edible. I wouldn't use it.
The question was,
what
can
it
you
does
reuse
do, yeah.
Can you reuse the bamboo?
Say that again. You can reuse, yes, and this is really funny because, so we lived in Michigan and this was in the 60s. So no Chinatown, no Asian stores. I think we were one of 2 Chinese families in our town. And my mother would always get a shipment once a year or once every 2 years from San Francisco, from her favorite grocery store. And we would use the dried leaf, and then she would wash it, you know, and dry it, and we'd use it again. So yes, definitely reusable. And I think the pole would be difficult. I have seen, there is a Japanese friend gave me a Japanese sweet where it was really interesting. It was an open pole, smaller than this, and it was stuffed with a sweet. And I think it was probably, they have a bean sweet. And what you did was you pushed it through with a little plunger, and it came out the other end. It was very, and you know, typically Japanese, so beautiful to look at. But anyways, you know, unless it's open, you do need to hack through to open up the cane.
Thanks so much. I wanted to know, how long do you cook the bamboo shoots when you want to prepare them?
So I cook them, you know, again, it depends on the size of the shoot. But they'd say that at 98 degrees, for 20 minutes, you can remove 70% of the toxin. So I've just upped it, and I do 30 minutes twice. And then I was giving some mushu vegetables to a friend, and I actually boiled it for about 2 hours because it was like, I don't want him to get sick. So, but anyway, so I would do it at least twice, and then, you know, give an extra rinse afterwards.
So a total of cooking how long?
So maybe an hour total.
And then do they have to be cooked to be prepared, or they're edible like that? What do you do?
They're edible right then and there. And you could use them as a salad. They're edible then, but they don't break down, interestingly, when you're cooking them. So that's another whole interesting thing. You know, many vegetables, the fibers break down, and bamboo doesn't break down.
If someone didn't get all the toxins out of it, what should you expect to go through when you've eaten it? What will it do to you? It's like a mild stomach ache. You're gonna keel over dead. What's gonna happen?
I mean, it's cyanide. I don't know.
Oh, it is, okay. No,
Yeah.
I'm saying, so if I cooked it 10 minutes too little, is someone gonna really get sick?
I think it depends on the person too.
Right.
Like, we all have different tolerances. What you will, if you have undercooked it, and when I initially started foraging for bamboo, and I didn't realize how long I needed to cook it, I would feel a little bit of something at the back of my throat.
Mhm.
And so that might be like if you've cooked it for an hour, 2 rinsings, and then you taste it and there's this slight acid feeling, cook it some more, just, take a little bit and try it again.
Could either one of you talk a little bit more about using mugwort?
So what I don't know very much about mugwort, except that, this is something that was found in use for absinthe. And you see the, famous Degas painting of that woman sitting very dejectedly in that Parisian cafe. But the way I used it last year was I boiled it and extracted a juice from it. So it was a green juice. And it has its own flavor. And what I did then was mix that warm juice with some glutinous rice flour and cooked it so that it was the basis for mochi. And I actually used the microwave to do that cooking. And then I stuffed it with red bean paste. There's a sort of ubiquitous through East Asia, and then made these tiny little dumplings. So
I'm showing it right now, Puwen. I've got it on the camera.
Yeah.
I've got it on my camera.
It wasn't quite that sickly green, but but I think it was pretty good. People were surprised.
It was delicious. Really delicious. And so when we get to do this again outside, maybe we can share some of our samples again. Because someone brought up mugwort, I heard the craziest thing, but especially in the age of coronavirus, people are having vivid, weird dreams. And
Oh yeah.
Unrelated, I read somewhere that if you put mugwort you stuff your pillowcase with mugwort, it will induce wild dreams.
Well, it's supposed to be either give you pleasant dreams, or you can have the exact opposite. So yeah.
Have you tried it, Puwen?
Not yet, but maybe I'll go pull some.
One person asked about using chives or wild garlic.
Yeah, that was one thing it's amazing when they first seem to emerge in the spring and people are saying, oh, the most invasive thing in my yard and it's too strong. And when I was a kid, and I think I was thinking about this, we lived on a few acres and spent most of our time outside. I think my mother wanted us out of the house. But one spring, I remember digging, there was a back section of the property that had a lot of wild onion, and we dug it and there were tiny, tiny little bulbs, which we cut off and we pickled. They're like, if you've been to Europe, the cornichons, the tiny little cucumbers. Well, this was the equivalent of, and they were delicious, really, really delicious. So, and then I think wild onion tops are fine, on your baked potato, as long as it's not in your front yard and a dog hasn't passed by.
All right. Well, we also had a question about pawpaws, and of course, maybe some of the wild foraging of fruit like persimmon. And if there are places or advice you can give to people about foraging some wild fruit that our native trees have, that would be very interesting. For instance, I know that persimmon, you should not eat that until we've had a frost, usually speaking. That's the old folks' advice.
Yeah. And persimmon, I don't know that it will harm you if you eat it when it's not quite ripe, but you'll never do it again because it is an astringent and it's the strangest feeling. It'll suck every drop of moisture right out of your mouth. It's weird. But if it's very mushy and aromatic, then it's fine. So interesting fruit.
Any advice about pawpaws?
I have some in my backyard because that's the only way I can reliably find them. They're a treasure, usually around bodies of water like rivers, streams. They're an understory tree. Mine aren't. Mine get probably too much more sun than they want, but that's all I've got. And if you do grow them in your own property, you need to be very, very patient. I've had mine, I wish I'd put a tag on it. It's at least 7 years old, maybe more. And the darn thing flowered for the first time. And I have others, you're supposed to have more than one. And none of them are flowering. So I don't know if I'm going to get fruit, but it sure had a lot of flowers on it this year. So.
All right, well, that seems to be it on the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
We look forward to seeing you next year at the library so we can hand out samples. I mean, that's sort of one of the best exchanges.
Yeah, and we try to do this talk at different times in the season so that we can highlight different plants. Because like I say, we're very lucky here in Northern Virginia. There's something to eat everywhere you go all through the year. At the Central Library, we've got the linden trees that we're usually under when we're doing the talk, and the linden trees also have edible parts to them. And so it's just nice that we're surrounded by so many edible plants when we're there.